Okay, good morning. My name is Paul Hansen. I'm president and CEO of a company called Minnepura. I guess it's Water Day here. And how many of you enjoyed a nice warm shower this morning? Cold glass of orange juice, maybe a hot cup of coffee or tea. And while we take water for granted here in Minnesota, the reality is that water is becoming a more and more scarce resource, right? Demand is going up. Contaminants and new contaminants are coming out of the woodwork, things like pesticides and herbicides, things that we didn't worry about even a few years ago in our water. And often these new contaminants, really we don't have technology to remove them. So we end up wasting the water because the contaminants can't be removed. And in some cases, even with filters where we can remove the contaminants, all we do is capture the contaminants so filters become clogged. And we also have toxic waste then that has to be disposed of. So Minnepura has a new solution. We're a spinoff from the University of Minnesota. Last week I was in Washington. We were one of 32 companies in the United States that won the best of university startups. We have a natural solution, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But before I do, I want to frame for you the opportunity, both in terms of the financial size, but also the social benefit. So if we look at just the United States, we use hundreds of billions of gallons of water every single day. The biggest use is in agriculture. And again, things like pesticides, herbicides, nitrates, and phosphates here in Minnesota, we've heard a lot about those runoffs from the farmer's field that are having detrimental impacts on the environment. Oil and gas. You know, we use 6 gallons of water for every 1 gallon of oil that's extracted here in the United States. And all of that water gets re-injected into the earth. Why? Because it's polluted, often with hydrocarbons and other elements. Industry, of course, has an issue in terms of contaminants that are in the waste stream that can't be removed. And even municipalities, things that we'd never thought about in the past, like trace pharmaceuticals. Let me take the smallest segment in this chart, recreational waters, and talk just a little bit about the opportunity and what we've developed. So across the United States, there's about 10 million pools, commercial and residential pools. And we all know you use chlorine, right, as a way to control the growth of germs and bacteria in those pools. What you probably don't know is there's a byproduct of chlorine called cyanuric acid that builds up over time when you use the chlorine, and when it gets to a level of about 100 parts per million, the chlorine is no longer effective. In commercial pools, the CDC does not allow a commercial pool to operate beyond 100 parts per million. So what does a commercial pool do? Today, there's no way to remove cyanuric acid effectively, so what they do is they take a half or a third of their water and they flush it down the drain and refill with fresh water as a way to bring the cyanuric level down to about half. They do that 3 to 4 times a year, typically. Now, all of those pools collectively hold about 300 billion gallons of water. So if they're flushing a third of that water down 3 times a year, you can do the math on that. Just the value of the water alone is worth about $400 million. Then you stop and think about the fact that there's chemicals and there's heat that's going down the drain as well. So we work together with a company called Lonza. They're a dominant player. They have about 75% share in the commercial market, and we develop prototypes for them that they've tested. Our solution doesn't require eliminating any of the water, changing anything out. We send it through our filters, and very safely, efficiently, and cost-effectively we remove the cyanuric acid. So how does the technology work? What we do is we select very specialized microorganisms, and we encase those in a silica gel. It's shown here as a little bead. And inside that bead is the microorganism, and we put that in a filter, in a column, if you will, and as the water passes through, the organism does their job and consumes the contaminant. And when they do that in a real natural organic way, we select it in such a way that the byproducts are really harmless kind of elements, typically things like carbon dioxide and water, okay? So the contaminants pass through, they're eliminated, no toxic waste to worry about. I mentioned Lonza, $4.5 billion Swiss company that we've worked with to develop some prototypes. We have a development agreement with. We developed a solution for the agricultural company Syngenta. They make seeds and herbicides, right? They have an herbicide in the United States that sells hundreds of millions of dollars a year called atrazine. we developed a solution for them that will remove atrazine very effectively from the environment. So if there's a farm spill, for example, we can quickly mitigate that so that we don't have any concerns about atrazine getting into the wastewater. Okay, key milestones for us. In the next 6 months, we're working on finalizing all of the details with Lonza and perhaps another company to develop the solution for cyanuric acid. We're also working, incidentally, with an egg producer that has a contaminant in their egg stream prior to freeze drying the eggs. And so we're working on a solution for them. We'll be raising our first A round before the end of the year, and then looking at launch a product in 2017. From a financial standpoint, this is a pretty interesting market for us. So we're starting with this beachhead market of cyanuric acid. We see line of sight, and these are figures that have come from Lonza, $15 to $20 million in sales. And then as we develop some of these other vertical applications, certainly have line of sight to $50 or more million in sales, with margins that are very typical, I would say, of best-in-class technology company, EBITDAs well in the 30–40% range. So that's a high-level overview of Minnepura. Appreciate your time and attention, and certainly welcome to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Paul. I got the microphone working here now, so let me ask you, what is it that this community can do best to help your business?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So first, we're looking for other partners in the space. So if you have a business that you have a difficult to remove component in your waste stream, we're very interested to talk to you to find a technical solution. That would be the first one. And then for investors, if you're interested in participating with the company, we're going to be raising $1.2 million on a $4.8 million pre-money valuation. One of the things I didn't mention is that we've been supported to date by about $3.5 billion of non-dilutive funding, right? So about $1.2 million of that has come from corporate and NSF-funded research. So we had a recent project with NSF, for example, where we demonstrated the ability to take very low levels of hydrocarbons out of produced water. And you know why that's a benefit, of course, today we're using a lot of water that could be cleaned and used for irrigation, for example, especially in California. So again, we've had about a $1.2 million from corporate and R&D contracts, and then another $2 million in non-dilutive grants. So those two areas would be great.
Okay, great. Let me bring around the microphone for those that have questions here.
Yeah, two questions. First, with your removing the cyanic acid from the pool with the chlorine, I can understand it, whatever your bacteria does, breaking it down to carbon dioxide water. What happens to the halogen, the chlorine? Where does that, the chloride, where does that go?
Okay, is that the question?
That's the first question.
Yeah, nothing happens to the chlorine in the pool. So chlorine can be very difficult on the enzymes that we're using. So our use instructions are to bring the chlorine level down to about 1 part per million, less than 3 parts per million, but 1 is ideal. The chlorine's not impacted, right? So we'll just remove the cyanuric acid and the chlorine levels will stay the same.
Okay. The next question is, the bacteria you're using, are you creating this bacteria in the laboratory, or is this a pre-existing thing that exists in the environment, and what is the risk of this to human beings?
Yeah, good question. Every solution is unique. So we have a proprietary algorithm that it depends on what we're trying to remove. We'll look at literally hundreds of thousands of potential reactions, and we'll select the right bacteria or enzyme to address that particular contaminant, right? So in the case of the project that we did for National Science Foundation, what we found is that there is literally hundreds of hydrocarbons that are different in this waste stream. So we ended up selecting 4 different bacterium that would be put together in a colony, if you will. And between those 4 bacterium, they could eliminate well over 100 different hydrocarbons. So every solution is hand-picked. Then we ferment the cells that we need, and they could be either live cells or, in the case of the pool application, for example, these are enzymes, so they're dead cells. So there's no impact in terms of human contact or health and it's delivered in a cartridge, so when the cartridge is spent, you simply dispose of it. Put it in the garbage can.
Paul, good presentation. My name is Paul Taylor. I'm a serial minter with the Rolodex of Kings. I'm going to put in a plug for the Clean Tech Open. This is my 7th year as a mentor with the Midwest region of the Clean Tech Open, and you need to think about applying to the 2017 competition.
Thank you. I did apply in 2016, and I was accepted, and just given the kind of the limited resources and time and the fact that we had Lanza and Syngenta teed up, we decided not to move forward, but I appreciate the comment.
Seeing as we're both Pauls,
Yeah, okay.
You are bullish on water too, obviously, so actually I have a comment leading to a question here that applies to both of you. I was just out feeding my meter out there so I wouldn't get a ticket. I noticed that the park water sprinkler system is on. Even though we've had record amounts of rainfall this year, it seems like maybe right hand, left hands aren't talking to each other in the public sector, public service sector. How can you address an issue like that? Get the public service, the government, if you will, local governments, addressing issues like what you're talking about.
Yeah, I guess I'm not certain I understand the question, but it's how do we interface with the government? And
Yeah, do you have a government market, I guess is what I'm saying, for the water departments, if you will, or a government application, something that might create an opportunity for them to be more effective in how they use resources.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that really is going to impact the success of the company is regulation, EPA regulation, and it's a little bit about if you build it, they will come. So, for example, with the hydrocarbon work that we're doing, there's no effective way today to remove hydrocarbons down below undetectable levels, right? And so the EPA is very reluctant to change the regulations that would require these kind of products. Once we can demonstrate that technically this can be accomplished, and it can be accomplished on a very large scale and very cost effectively, we're very optimistic that the regulations will follow. But our focus right now is on industry where there's specific toxins. So, you know, again, for example, Syngenta came to us because they know atrazine could potentially be a problem if there were a spill. And so we worked with them to develop a solution specifically for them. So in the short term, we'll focus on industrial partners where they have the distribution. We don't have to put our limited resources in that, and we'll go after things that are very valuable to them. Hope that answered the question.
So I got 2 questions and a possible comment depending on your answer. But first, how does your process look like for cleaning up atrazine? That's kind of a nasty chemical. Used to be a commercial applicator for a couple of years. But the other question is, with agricultural nitrate runoff, the person in charge of cleaning that up is typically a government agent. So who is your customer, and how would you get into that?
Yeah, so good questions, and I think I maybe have a picture here. Incidentally, I'll get to that in just a second, but this is what our capsules look like, a BB, but when you look at them very carefully, it looks really more like a sponge. So that's the silica, and then our enzyme is encased in there, so as the water passes through, the enzyme or the microorganism will consume the particular contaminant, and that's a photograph of that there. How we would envision this working, so with Syngenta we have 2 solutions. One, we can provide the enzyme in a bead form that can simply be mixed into the earth that has been contaminated with atrazine, and we've run those tests, or I should say Syngenta has run those tests, and shown that this is an effective solution, that we can actually remove all of the excess atrazine from the environment. Or in a municipal water supply kind of situation, what we would do is incorporate our beads right in line, so to speak. So the water, as you see from that schematic, comes through. We have a small coating of our beads on top of the sand filters. That addresses, in this case, the atrazine, or it could address a trace pharmaceutical, and then the water would continue on through the processing. So again, a customer in this case could either be Syngenta, which would have the product as sort of a backup if there was a spill. It could be a farmer, or it could be the municipal water supply. The other thing that we have, sorry to interrupt one more time, the other thing that we've looked at is a boom that can be placed where the water drains from a field towards a waterway. And if that boom is treated with our beads, as the water passes through, that would eliminate the atrazine.
There's a project with the University of Minnesota Agricultural Department of Precision Ag called Discovery Farms, and it looks at water runoff and chemical runoff. You should try and see if you can connect with them, because I'm sure they'd be interested in doing research with what you're doing.
Yeah, and I should say, you know, again, that we're a University of Minnesota startup, so we are really well tied into both the bio side as well as the physics department. Thank you. Our lab is in the St. Paul campus, as a matter of fact.
Kind of a theoretical question. Your laboratory obviously is screening for bacteria that will consume certain types of chemicals. It's been known for a long time that there are oil-eating bacteria. Okay. Presumably you know which ones some of those are. The oil contamination of water is a major, major problem in this country, especially like the spill in the Gulf and the reinjection of contaminated water back into the earth from oil drilling.
Right.
Are you working in that area to find bacteria that can eat oil out of water at a significant enough rate that could be used to clean up these kind of problems?
The short answer is yes. So that was the crux of our National Science Foundation project, which we just ended, where the objective was to take produced water that is contaminated with hydrocarbons or oil, pass them through the filter, and make the water safe for irrigation. So yes, in a traditional method, if we just used a bacterium that is known to consume oil, if you were to put it, for example, into a big oil spill, it very quickly becomes overwhelmed and consumed right by the oil. So the magic here is this really safe environment that we provide with this silica gel, where the enzyme or the bacteria in this case, because it would actually be living, can live and grow and thrive. And so literally it can last for months, perhaps even longer, rather than just minutes or hours if it were just exposed to the environment. And I should mention, of course, there's quite a strong patent portfolio around this particular application with the silica gel, which is really one of the unique features here. But absolutely looking at how we can remove and consume oil. Even today, if you used a very fine filter, very quickly that filter becomes fouled and clogged. And then again, you have toxic waste that you need to address. So in our application, really there's no traditional filter to foul or clog, and no waste to dispose of.
I thought I saw some hands at the back earlier. Other questions? Well, I would ask that everyone have a chance to engage Paul if anything else comes up to mind. Otherwise, thank you very much, Paul, for the presentation.
Thank you.